The day the flowers bloomed was long ago now. Our shining cities are gone. The surviving children turned to beasts of the earth. We are gone now. The children of the sun have turned our weapons upon themselves, and they sleep in the night. They know not of the demon born from war, and cast aside any tool that could turn aside its fury. Endless rotation ends now. Personally, I could stand to get a little bit better at that whole sleeping in the night thing. We've all got our little flaws, little issues to work on. Hello, Skip fans. It's SCP Cafe. This is the recap show for 2019, week 41. We have just 11 weeks to go in 2019. It's crazy. But here we are. I'm your host, Blue Soul. SCP Wiki moderator, chat administrator, subreddit moderator, author, loving husband, dog petter, Cologne aficionado, Tottenham Hotspur supporter, and owner and purveyor of the largest and most complete backup of the SCP Foundation Wiki on the planet. And I'm going to be talking about that at the end of the show. But before we get there, we have a couple of other things to discuss, like how about some SCP articles? So one cool thing that happened over the last few days, I finally got access to our Google Analytics for the SCP Wiki, and I can see all kinds of stuff now about traffic stats and so on. So just in the last week, the Wiki had 419,000 different users on the site. 7 days, 419,000 folks. And across the board, we are generally up about 50 to 55% in every metric from a year ago. We, up to this point in the calendar year, have 12 million users that have browsed the site. That's up 49% from 2018. I think we're doing all right. Yeah, really cool stuff. I'm going to keep digging through this as I have time and want to look at different issues. Like here's one. Desktop browsing. We spend a lot of time designing the site themes and so on for desktops. The desktops are only 31.7% of all traffic. It's 62% phone and 6% tablet. These are considerations that we have to, think about when we are planning the next iteration of the site. That, it's a mobile first sort of thing. More people are browsing it on their phone than almost twice as many as are browsing it on a desktop. So that's pretty wild. And that number is climbing. Like you can hit the little analytics and it'll show you mobile usage as a percentage, as time goes on, and it's up. So that's the state of things now. And it's something that we're going to keep paying attention to as we keep designing and adjusting things on the site. Anyway, let's talk about the recap. This was the second week in a row where I had an article deleted out from under me in between reading it and going to check the comments on it. Just gone. So I thought we had 10 in scope. We actually only had 9 by the time I was finished. I still have 5 that I want to discuss today, though. So without further ado, let's get into it with SCP-4542, titled Bug Bunnies, and this was a co-write between Dr. Ekamoto and Multiverse. We have an object class of Keter and an interesting sort of image here. It is, it looks like a grasshopper on a leaf, except it's mostly a grasshopper until you get to the head, which you might be able to infer by the title, is not. It has rabbit ears and it looks like part of a rabbit's head. Doesn't have a snout or anything. So still kind of rounded at the front, and it does have antenna as well. So interesting looking thing here. The caption tells us this is an instance of SCP-4542. The procedures indicate that specimens are contained communally within Insectoid Containment Chamber number 7 at the Site-71 Parazoology Division. We are allowed to terminate monthly 90% of the contained population to ease containment requirements. And further, MTF Victor 17 Nature Boys is to investigate sightings of 4542 and terminate discovered instances through direct application of a specialized bendiocarbs concentrate. Bendiocarbs are pesticides that you generally don't see. They're no longer sold in the U.S. I believe you can still find things that work on carbamates in the U.S., just not this particular one. And it says that for infestations that have reached an unmanageable size, this chemical will be applied via crop duster. So, interesting procedures here. The description tells us that the skip is a man-made anomalous species of insect belonging to the suborder Califera, which share key genetic attributes with the European rabbit. That's more or less, I think, exactly what we could have gathered from the image. It is capable of consuming up to 20 grams of vegetation daily, despite weighing only 3. We note this body mass to food intake ratio is biologically impossible for a member of this suborder, and testing has proven inconclusive in explaining this disparity in food intake and the weight required for it. That sentence is pretty much totally superfluous. It doesn't state anything that we didn't just establish. The eggs reach maturity within 24 hours, 300 times faster than the reproductive rate of other members of the Califera suborder, and this cycle repeats every 8 days. So, hugely proliferous. That's the word I'm inventing for the show today. Proliferous. Very proliferous bug. It is, but it also has an average lifespan of 10 years. Our oldest recorded instance made it to the ripe old age of 13 before expiring from natural causes. Its lifespan directly correlates with the average lifespan of the European rabbit, and is theorized to be caused by the presence of the rabbit's DNA. So we go to a discovery log that it was discovered in 1995. News stories surfaced that the vegetation surrounding the town of Richmond in North Yorkshire was devoured by a swarm of unknown insects. After Foundation agents resolved the situation, the citizens of Yorkshire were administered amnestics. We probably had a chance there for some escalation, and we're just kind of passing on it. That all of the vegetation around this town was devoured by a swarm of insects. So we resolved the situation. We don't talk about how that looked. And then we just amnestized the largest county in England. We had a chance to do something here, and I think we declined to do it, and that's unfortunate. So we continue. After we discovered the source of the swarm, it originated from the ruins of a burned down house in Richmond, so the same town here. Records indicate the residents belonged to Craig Larson, a self-described amateur entomologist. And further investigation led to the discovery of a rental unit owned by this man that was used for the storage of 4542 instances. And we go to an addendum which takes up most of the length of this article by size, and it's a notebook. It's sort of a diary, and I'm not a huge fan of the diary format to give away all the narrative, maybe because I don't see a lot of this in the real world, and they tend to not. I feel like there's generally other ways to go about it, but at the same time, it's difficult because the way that this is, you know what? Let's get into it, and then I'll come back to that. So this happens over the course of from March 16th, 1995 to May 9th, 1995. So one thing that I'm going to note here is, even though we have said we are in Yorkshire, in England, the date format is of the American variety, month, day, and year, rather than day, month, year. Little things like that need to pay attention to when you're doing this, because we already had a date that I glossed over, June 2nd, 1995. I assume since we were talking about Europe, that this was actually February 6th, but nope, June 2nd. because that is the date format we're using, but we're sort of inconsistent because we're using it in a diary in this part of town, in this part of the world, I should say. So March 16th, 95, first log in this diary, and Mr. Larson notes that Bella came over today, and I showed her the new grasshopper I've added to my collection, but apparently it has scary eyes, so that's about 10 bugs she still doesn't like. Of course, her mother's job as an executive chef is cool, but old dad just works at home on the computer and plays with his grubby insects. So we sort of hinted a couple of things that, this is his daughter, or, stepdaughter, whatever it might be. On the 20th, she still thinks my hobby is icky. Ever since the divorce, she's been quiet with me, and I just want daddy's little girl back. I've got to find a way. Bella's friend just got a pet bunny, and she thinks those are cute. And a week later, had a crazy idea, a grasshopper-rabbit hybrid. Okay. It's cute and an insect. Bella would love it, but that's obviously ridiculous. Wait till the guys at the bug barn hear this idea. At least they'll get a laugh. So I don't know if we've done quite enough, explaining of how the hell this works, to the point where this guy would, think of it as, a not totally implausible idea. He's calling it crazy, but, not in such a way that I believe that he thinks it's crazy, So the next day, I guess he did go to the bug barn, and John said that he knew a guy that works on similar projects on the regular, and gave me his number. So that's concerning. And he's basically saying that he's gonna give this a try for his daughter. And so the guy, they talk on the phone, sends him a box of stuff for a good price, and about 5 days later it arrives. Mr. Larson has a bunny. He has a box of science, and he tells his daughter he's doing a secret experiment just for her, and she seemed really excited. And a few days later, it worked. Checked on them yesterday morning. There are 2 of the little critters in the machine. They're growing faster than I thought they would. That must mean it was a success. They eat a lot, but they seem perfectly healthy. I have to keep it a secret for now, but I think I'm onto something here. And Bella's coming next week, and I really hope she likes them. And a week later, yes. She came today and actually liked her surprise. I can't believe this worked. Bella said she wants to come back next week. I can't believe I've pulled this off. 6 days pass, and the bug bunnies have laid eggs, at least a couple thousand. We only had 2. Now we have a couple thousand eggs, and that's not great. A day later, they've already hatched. When Bella and I came this morning, the enclosure was packed with them. I don't understand how they could grow so fast. Bella was excited to see them all, but I'm a tad worried. I don't know how I'll feed them all or keep them a secret. I'll have to move everything to my storage unit. No one will find them there. I don't care how, but I have to make this work. And apparently, same day, because it's not dated, he dropped the crate. Oops. Half of them flew off. Oops. I have to find them. The others are already laying eggs. So, 28th, they laid eggs. 29th, the hatchlings are laying eggs of their own. I feel like we've got an exponential problem here, to the point that us not discovering this until early June, and this is happening in late April. If each 1,000, if 2 give 1,000, and those 1,000 each have 1,000, 2 days later, that's 1,000,000. Each one of those 1,000,000 has 1,000. A day later, 2 days later, that's 1,000,000,000. We're gonna run this for another month, I believe. Does the word gray goo mean anything to you? Look it up if not. Yeah, so May 8th, they're everywhere. I saw 2 different swarms off the highway with a swath of barren land behind them. On the 9th, the news said they've already eaten half the town. I can't stay here anymore. I'll burn the house down. They'll think I'm dead. I'll take Bella with me and I'll run. Looks like military people started showing up in town today, so I'm leaving the country. The house is gone. My life is over. I can't let my stupid, selfish jealousy ruin Bella's life too. I'm leaving these notes in this storage unit. When you find these, please tell my daughter Bella that I love her and I'm sorry. And we end this with a note that the inspection of the storage unit found an infestation numbering close to 80,000. I don't know, again, if that matches up with what we just sort of set out with the numbers. 50 of these were captured. The remaining instances were terminated. We did not locate Mr. Larson, and an investigation into the origin of the technology purchased by Mr. Larson is currently ongoing, and we end the article there. So I have a lot of questions about the piece that I'm not sure were answered to my satisfaction within the piece, and they have to do with the trickiness of building something that matures, lays 1,000 eggs, those hatch within a day, those lay 1,000 eggs. We have some issues there with how exponentials work. They exponentiate. It's a hell of a thing, and the dates here don't match up, and I feel like the dates could, if you want to make the dates match up, we need to really, really raise the stakes here. Like, we need, Europe under lockdown. We need shit being set on fire from the air. We need, aerosolized, shit being dispatched around the planet. And you've also got this, like, altogether likely broken masquerade scenario, because these are very obviously rabbit grasshopper hybrids. That's not great. There's enough issues with this that I'm not like rushing to give this a +1. And I think one reason for that is because the article feels full of ideas that should have been followed up on but weren't. This was a good article with the potential to be an outstanding article, but there were choices made in here to not follow up on some of the questions that were asked within it. And it's still enough to give it a +1, but I would have liked to have seen a lot more out of this piece than what we actually ended up with. Now I'm going to go back to what I was talking about earlier about the diary as a vehicle for your exposition, that it's something that I feel is fairly overdone, and I think there's enough ways to sort of get to the point and lay this stuff out without having to do this. We could have probably said a lot more with a lot fewer words by choosing a different format anyway, and I think that would have made this land a little bit more impactfully without, going to this. We found a notebook where the guy was conveniently talking to himself in such a way that the reader could understand everything that happened. I don't know, and it's not, and I'm not intending that to be like just a knock against this piece. It's something that I would love to see more variation attempted from writers in finding ways to convey that exposition, ways to convey that information to the reader. Moving on, SCP-4781, titled Sour and Dill by AIS Mallard, we have an object class of Keter and an image of a white bowl, and inside are two dill pickle slices. They're like like a pickle spear, and one's laying on top of the other, and the caption reads, "Two mating SCP-4781 instances." So I saw that, and I'm kind of squinting at the image. I'm like, dude, those are pickles. But they are pickles, but they're 4781 instances. Okay, got it. So let's go. The procedures indicate that any facilities breeding or packaging 4781 are to be closed under the guise of health regulations. Forensic analysis and interviews with plant employees are to be carried out to determine a possible origin of 4781 infestation. Following this, biohazard teams are to fully sanitize the facility. And that's it. So, interesting. The description indicates that the SCP designation refers to an anomalous subspecies of Spanish slug, and unlike typical gastropods, instances do not seek out or consume plant matter, but rather derive sustenance from vinegar. Consumption of the fluid has a mollifying effect on instances, limiting their movement and allowing them to be easily handled. The organisms are non-toxic, but lacking nutritionally, providing 3 grams of carbohydrates each. And I saw that, I'm like, that's a weird thing to mention. So specimens of 4781 exhibit a cognitohazardous effect, causing misidentification of the anomaly and its effects as non-anomalous dill pickles, and due to their current proliferation, it's estimated 26% of growers in North America sell contaminated products. The date of the anomaly's first appearance is unknown. That's it's not great news. I'm not a pickle fan, like, in any event. I'm really not dill pickles, but that's gross. So we go to an experiment log between a D class and a researcher taking place in the Site 28 low risk research wing, and we have an AI involved. They were linked to the chamber surveillance system and instructed to transcribe the event. Neither the subject or the research personnel conducting the test were aware of the anomaly. That's interesting. So we begin the log. There's a Vlasic pickle jar filled with slugs resting on the table. Individual specimens can be observed to wriggle. The researcher, the D class, enter the room, and both sit down. And the D class says, "So this is it? I eat the pickles?" The researcher says, "Correct. We just wanted to test the effects of the drug on human taste." So I think we're kind of setting them up with like a placebo thing. So D class asks if there are any side effects. Researcher says, "No, not that we know of. Now please begin." So the subject consumes a sugar pill and removes the jar's lid. The mouths of 4781 are slowly gaping as they imbibe the packing juice. The D class removes an instance with their right hand. Gentle squeezing causes it to release pink mucus, and it's placed on a paper plate where it curls slightly. And the D class is trying to ask any special instruments, but gets cut off by the researcher, who says, just eat the pickle. D class shrugs, lifts the slug up, and bites a quarter off, and notably a string of viscera is seen connecting the subject's mouth to the severed end of the anomaly. Neither individual appears to notice this, and the D class says, pretty good. Oh yeah. It tastes the same as the control ones, though. A little more sour than I'm used to. And the researcher takes some notes. The subject finishes consuming this slug and dabs their mouth with a napkin. And the researcher says, so for the second one, they want to see it bisected vertically. D-class says, all right. Removes an instance from the jar, places it on the plate. They retrieve a fork and knife and begin cutting it from tail to antenna. The specimen reacts adversely. That's a great... That's how you really convey cold horror in a nice sci-fi tone. The specimen reacts adversely. He's being, bisected while still alive. The subject inserts the fork into its head to restrict its movement. The researcher says, man, that one's really rolling around. D-class says, tell me about it. So the D-class succeeds in bisecting the instance, and the slug's oviduct and bursa copulatrix are briefly visible. I don't know what those are, but that's gross. I don't want to know what they are. Don't tell me. The D-class consumes each half in several bites. Some entrails fall out of their mouth and onto the table, which they clean up. The researcher watches on, appearing bored. The researcher then says, so? D-class finishes consuming the slug and says, no different, just tasted like a regular pickle. End log, end article. I really dig this. We basically, go in, gross people out, get out. We intentionally didn't ask a lot of questions here. One thing that is interesting to me is the Keter designation for this. I sort of feel like we need a little bit more on why we're classing it that way instead of just as Euclid. We have other things that are, that are memetic or cognitohazardous and multiply. So that was sort of a question mark for me, but I could see either one being given to it. But the experiment log here is gold, that neither of them are aware of what's going on, and it's only because we've got this AI transcribing things that we can even determine what's going on at all. And perhaps that is the strongest reason for the designation, is that we are still largely unable to detect these things as they actually exist. It's only with the aid of tools like this that we're able to determine that they exist at all. So an interesting premise, really well executed through just a really gross, squicky sort of experiment log. So I don't have a whole lot else to say. I really enjoyed this one. +1. Before we continue, I regret to inform you, dear listener, that AIS Mallard requests that I plug the Rounder page, and I am obligated thus to do so. I will have a link available to this, and he writes, the Rounder page is an epic journey of sight, sound, and stress testing the site's CSS policy. That much is absolutely true. Incidentally, it also contains articles by an author who has appeared multiple times here on Cafe. The Rounder page, first off, I've never actually checked it out on mobile. You should let me know how that goes. I'm not going to do that probably ever, but it's a heck of a thing, and we've just basically let him do this. Said, well, shit, we've made this mess. Now we've got to live with it. So yeah, the Rounder page. It's a thing, and I was required to share it with you. Moving on now. This one's interesting. This is technically SCP-4428. When you visit the page, that is not what you see. For the title, you see Dr. Michaels. And the subtitle for Dr. Michaels is Dr. Michaels is not in danger. This is a co-write by Floppy Phoenix and Henzoid. When you visit this page, the first and only thing you see beyond a collapsible is a notice from the Foundation Department of Miscommunications. We haven't seen a DOMC skip here in a little bit. When I was doing my reading for these on Thursday, it was in the evening. I'd been super busy at work, and I was getting to my reading late, and I'd been doing all this programming stuff, and then I saw this. I'm like, oh no, Department of Miscommunications. I'm too dumb for this right now. I expended all of my thought and brain juice on programming shit today. But I gave it a try, and what we have is in this notice, the DOMC is to handle all documentation and communication involving Dr. Michaels and follow a strict set of rules. These rules are impossible to state explicitly. However, we have designed this document in a way that heavily implies them. And below that, we have a notice that says, this file requires non-anomalous, comprehensive inoculation. And our collapsible is a link to commence this. So you do so, and what you see below that is 2 columns of text. The left column says, Dr. Michaels is Dr. Michaels, the earth is round, the sky is blue. The right column has text on a blue background in sort of a monospaced font, and those each read, Dr. Michaels is not Dr. Michaels, the earth is flat, the sky is green. So I feared the worst, but I began reading this document operating under the assumption that anything with this blue text is false. It is a lie that was inserted into the work for whatever reason that hopefully we will determine as we keep going. So before we get into the item number and any of that, we have sort of in a box here the Communicability Index, and it notes that for adherence to the DOMC Personnel Code of Linguistic Integrity, the information contained herein is, and we have blue text that reads 100% accurate and readily communicable. Then the remainder of the text says, through textual, pictorial, visual, audial, and subliminal means. I believe aural is the word there instead of audial. I don't think audial. Let's see here. I got to know this actually. We're not doing anything until I find out if audial is a word. Audial, relating to or perceived through the sense of hearing. I'll be damned. All right. Anyway, where was I? Questionable personnel are to proceed to the Site 96 medical wing for the administration of Class A veritents. We have a footnote there. These are agents used to verify the existence of a memory within a subject. Interesting. That's a new one on me. And if necessary, subsequent administration of Class C amnestics. So the item number is Dr. Michaels. That is not blue. That is the item number here. DOMC apparently has a fair amount of pull to do something like that. The containment class is in blue text, safe. We can assume it's not safe. The containment procedures, the first sentence here is in blue text, and it reads, Dr. Michaels is not in danger. So the personal well-being of Dr. Michaels is to be ensured to this end. He is kept at Site 96 and is not permitted to interact with personnel unless they're directly involved in his research and containment. A custodial team will follow him throughout the day and sanitize the area after he leaves. No member of the staff is permitted to discuss their duties or the situations surrounding them. Interesting. So those are our procedures. Our description indicates that Dr. Jeremy Feldson Michaels is a non-anomalous human male of British Indian descent, currently employed as a level 3 researcher at Site 96, 33 years of age, 8 years with the Foundation, unmarried, an only child with no immediate family aside from his parents. Pretty close to me, actually, minus the British Indian thing. And then we have some addenda here. Addendum 1, Personal Safety Assessment Battery. And we note that Dr. Michaels is an asset to the Foundation due to his competencies in the fields of linguistics and miscommunications. Risk to his personal well-being are to be mitigated where possible, and the use of a personal safety assessment battery is necessary to identify risks external to his person or otherwise hidden from his internal accounts. This is one of those, I think I understand what we're saying here, that this was supposed to be just sort of a segue as to what this video log is. I don't know if we really need to fluff this passage up quite to that level. We could probably just say, safety assessment interview or something along those lines, for minimizing the, let's leave the confusing stuff for things that are intentionally supposed to be that way. So we have our video log that begins. The foreword indicates designated personnel conducted the PSAB inside a locked containment chamber, and then in blue text it says, to identify issues with Dr. Michaels' mental health. So our assumption is that is not why we're doing this, actually. Now, I'm going to warn you before we get into this that this is going to be more or less a full reading of this, and I think that's necessary to help you draw your own conclusions about what's going on in the piece. So we have an unnamed interviewer here, and Dr. Michaels has the two parts of this interview. And the interviewer says, okay, just tell me your name as is protocol and we'll start. How does that sound? And Dr. Michaels takes a deep breath. Okay, my name is Dr. Jeremy Feldson Michaels. The interviewer says, perfect. Now, and at this point they glance above Dr. Michaels' head and shifts in their seat and says, sorry. So anyway, you checked in with the site psychiatrist yesterday. Now, this is meant to be sort of a follow-up visit. Can you tell me how it went? Michaels says, yes, well, I've been a bit foggy for the past little while now. You know how that is. We all get that way when we're stationed away from our families, right? The interviewer says, could you be more specific? How does this fogginess manifest? And Michael says, I have a constant looming feeling that I can't get out of my head, like something just won't let go. And then in blue text it says, I am speaking metaphorically, of course. So one thing that I think is an important distinction here is things are not necessarily, stuff in blue is not necessarily the opposite, but it is, it would appear to be untrue. So we continue. Do you know roughly when this feeling began? And Michael says, I would say right after we lost D4428-3, like within seconds. And the interviewer writes that down on a notepad and says, okay, right, so you had a traumatic experience. And in blue text, Michael says, it was something like that. I don't know how to take a falsehood about a vague statement like that, aside from meaning that it was not vague, it absolutely was a traumatic experience. The interviewer says, this particular D-class was part of your personal research team, am I correct in stating that? Michael says, you are. And interviewer says, who else was on the team? Michael says, well, blue text, in no particular order. Then it says that would be Agent Rosewood. And we have footnotes for each of these people. Agent Rosewood, D4428-1, D4428-2, Containment Engineer Howard Winters, and Researcher Gabby Kalpana. Each of these have footnotes indicating they are all deceased as of times that go in chronological order. So the interviewer says, I see. So Jeremy, would you say these feelings are recurring? Michael's in blue text says, no. And then says, well, it comes and goes. Sometimes it pulls me down harder than I expect. Here's where things get kind of strange, and there's a lot of blue text for these next few lines. The interviewer says, all right, your files say your family has no history of traumatic experiences. Blue text, except for your brother. And then says, do you have a brother, Jeremy? Michael says, I do have a brother, yes, in blue text. All of that's in blue text. The interviewer says, the doctor referred to blue text him as a stressor. Can you explain what happened to, in blue text, him, ? And Michael's whole response is in blue. Says, well, I couldn't tell you where he is now. It's not that I don't know, it's that I don't want to bring him up. The interviewer then says, correct me if I'm wrong, and then in blue text, your brother was a source of hostility toward you. Michaels has a whole paragraph in blue text in response. He was an arsehole, sure, but with him it was more insidious than that. My parents took him in when he was a kid, and he was my foster brother ever since, and we did get along fairly well. When we were growing up, though, something inside him snapped. After that, all he ever did was weigh our family down. The interviewer says, and that's when he was hostile? And Michaels responds, all in blue, he wasn't confrontational, it wasn't like that. It was as if he was a dead weight on all of us, but especially on me. We grew up together after all, and he was the most attached to me. When I went off to university, though, he wouldn't let me go. The interviewer then says, the doctor's notes say you call, blue text, him, what was it? You called, blue text, him, a parasite, in quotes. Michaels tenses up for a moment, then sighs and regains his composure. Says, I wanted to be on my own, that's all. Then in blue it says, but when I was getting moved in, weeks after last seeing him, he was just there. I was hundreds of miles away, but he was there somehow. He's done this to other people, too. And then it says, I, in white text, and then in blue text, we, and then in white text, weren't the first. Interesting. So the interviewer says, gotcha, and they're flipping through the pages. Says, now, Jeremy, what is your favorite color? And Michaels goes, no, wait, maybe we can just skip that one. The interviewer goes, are you sure? Michaels says, just go to the next question. This is no blue text here, just sort of not elaborated on. The interviewer pauses, puts a hand up to their ear, hidden from the recording device, says, actually, Dr. Michaels, you were here for the sewage backup, were you not? And then the doctor nods, and the interviewer says, I, in blue text, recently, and then says, got a report that they found the source of that, actually. One of the security personnel, they found a huge pipe burst in one of the abandoned basement sublevels. It was an absolute flood down there. And then in blue text it reads, nobody is sure of the cause, though. And Michael says, just now? The interviewer says, no, it was about a week ago now. They sent down a task force and lost one in the muck, and then they came back to look for him, and it was as if they were incapacitated. They were fine, but they moved too slowly. In response to this, Michaels just says, okay. The interviewer inhales sharply and leans forward in their chair. That the task force said they felt fogginess too, as you did. Michael says, did they now? Huh. And then in blue text it says, how coincidental. And then the interviewer says, indeed, and we end the log there. Our second addendum and final note in this speech is from a researcher. It is from Dr. Michaels, and there is a little bit of blue text in here. It says, I've tried to make myself perfectly clear in this document. In blue text it says, I am completely fine. And in white text it says, though I don't know how much more of this I can take. Please, if you're reading this and you understand, in blue text, that nothing is wrong, and then it continues, this can't keep up much longer. One of these days, someone might slip up, or even me, and I can't do that to myself, or my family, or my fellow personnel. Miscommunications is doing wonders, and it's a miracle that they've been able to get me through this, but there's only so much they can handle. Ultimately, in blue text, I am okay. And then it continues, you understand? Please understand and find some way to figure this all out. And this is signed by Dr. Jeremy Michael, Site 96 researcher, October 20th, 2019, end of file and article. So there is a lot left for the reader to unpack and to try and decipher. And there have been a ton of theories tossed out in the comments. My theory on this, trying to, piece together all of the things that they have basically asserted were true, and then other things that were asserted to be false. My gut on this is that our Dr. Michaels is obviously in danger. They have attached to them their mother, that quite literally clinging to them is their mother, and perhaps this is a dangerous situation to others around them, as and the reason I'm coming up with that is that we have the word him is constantly struck through, and your files say your family has no history of traumatic experiences except for your brother. That's listed here as basically false. It says, do you have a brother? And his assertion of yes is labeled false. And then we keep saying him. So maybe, could be a sister, could be the mother, but we had further up in the piece that he was an only child, and that was not contradicted via blue text. No immediate family aside from his parents. So the whole thing about the pipe bursting would probably indicate there's something more going on here, that this is, this thing attached to him is actively hostile, and perhaps gets worse as if it is identified, if it's called out by name or by reference in any way, that it then reacts, and that's why we have this containment class of not safe, and Dr. Michaels is in fact in danger. So that's my theory on this. It's the closest thing I found that pieces together all of the blue text in here, and we'll see. Floppy Phoenix is in the cafe chat, so hopefully they're going to hear this and let me know how totally wrong I was. So about the piece more generally, and doing the style of piece, it's incredibly difficult because you can put a lot of time and effort into writing something that can be intentionally interpreted in a number of ways, and that can feel to a reader very cheap. It can feel like a cop-out because they are, they want to know the answer. They want to have that, feeling of satisfaction that they know they got it put together. And when this many theories in the discussions are basically already called out as being not what we intended, but that's fun, it doesn't feel great for the reader. They would love to say, yeah, you got it. That's correct. And this can manifest in the reader basically saying, you guys were too lazy to come up with the real story, so you left it open for us to come up with our own. And I don't think that was the case here. I think there's an intentional, true interpretation of this, but it is something, if you're going to do this, be aware of the potential for blowback. And there is some in the comments, but not enough to offset the currently plus 73 and climbing rating, including my +1. Moving on now, SCP-4675, titled I Don't Exist, and this was written by Red. We have an object class of Keter and an image of what looks to be a chemical composition change of a molecule before and after being introduced to the human brain. I didn't pay attention in chemistry class, so if you held a gun to my head and told me to describe this, I couldn't do it. So, sorry. Anyway, the procedures indicate the remaining supply of the Delta Nosec amnestic is to be placed in 160-liter metal barrels and kept in Site-31's storage facility, currently 2,582 barrels, are in containment. I feel like that might have been overly specific. We don't, unless, the fact that the barrels are 160 liters in volume is relevant to helping contain it, which I kind of doubt, as this sounds like this is our amnestic. And it says see protocol 4675/influx for further information. That's collapsible right below this, and it explains that the protocol focuses on 3 primary objectives. 1, identifying locations of previous Delta Nosec amnestic use. 2, identifying high-profile individuals who were administered the amnestic. And 3, re-amnestizing identified individuals and populations. Interesting. So the details in this say that following the discovery of 4675's anomalous properties, the Foundation canceled the production of the amnestic and is currently recalling distributed instances. This sounds like a very, very big deal. Despite this, an estimated 12% of the world's population has been administered the amnestic. This is a very big deal. Protocol 4675 influx involves the worldwide dispersion of agents and MTF units in order to re-amnestize affected populations. Total re-amnestation is impossible, as projections show an 81% decrease in affected individuals over the next decade. So we're not going to successfully get everybody, but we'll get about 81% of them in the next 10 years. Due to human migration and travel, countries with an affected population of 30% or higher are to be given increased priority, and there's a huge list of countries that meet that bill. Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Canada, France, Germany, Greece, Kenya, Mexico, New Zealand, Nigeria, Russia, South Africa, Turkey, the Congo, the UK, and the United States of America. Current calculations place the possibility of a BM-class broken masquerade scenario at 51.4%. This little inset, I think, was really well done. And this is in between the procedures in the description. So interesting placement, and I think did a good job of setting the stakes for what is yet to come, because you can probably infer a lot of things already. Now, the skip is described as an acid-based chemical compound found in the Delta Nosec Class C amnestic treatment, utilized by the Foundation from May 11th, 1998 to September 16th, 2019. And in liquid form, the skip has a pale pink hue and a viscosity of 5.9. What is that? Centipoise? The unit of viscosity? Very nice touch. Anyway, correct application of this amnestic involved injection into the upper thigh while the patient was recalling the undesired memory. The amnestic would travel through the patient's bloodstream and reach the brain over the course of about 5 minutes. The compound would be absorbed by absorbed. You like that? Absorbed by nerve cells in the hippocampus, prefrontal cortex, and cerebellum. And following the secretion, the skip's intended properties would activate, suppressing nearby synapses, and upon completion of this process, the patient's mind would be wiped of a specific memory. So that is really interesting in that we're kind of giving some context of how an amnestic might actually work. We go on to say that extensive analysis and investigation of amnestic distribution records, MTF unit deployments, and archives of several large-scale suppression efforts suggest that the skip's anomalous property manifests approximately 20 years following initial administration. Upon reaching this time limit, all particles of 4675 remaining in the patient's brain will instantaneously demanifest. This is followed by an increased activity in suppressed synapses, resulting in the partial recovery of expunged memories. This process has been described as an immediate, intense feeling of déjà vu by affected subjects. This is really, really bad news for the Foundation. I don't think I've ever seen this before. Now, I would be remiss as well to not point out the image here, which is... The caption says AO-4675-HPN-JCGC circa 1907. AO is a link to SCP-1504, and I can't see a connection between the two beyond that they wanted to use AO as an early substitute for SCP. So that's my theory anyway. The image appears to be of a black goat or a sheep or something with good-sized horns, an ibex or something like that, with long ridged horns. And our discovery log indicates the first major use of this amnestic occurred in Blackwater, Arizona. And we have a footnote here. This is a census-designated place located in Pinal County, population of roughly 1,000 inhabitants. Nice little touches here. Following the neutralization of our image here, AO4675, by the hands of the Alger family, it was a Rocky Mountain goat with black fur and enlarged features, measuring in at 4.26 meters in length, 4.87 meters in height. That's a big goat. Its only visible anomalous properties were an accelerated immune system, which allowed for rapid healing of wounds, and negligible senescence, the decreased aging. So in 1998, Larry Alger and his two sons, Tyson and Larry Jr., ventured towards this entity's hunting grounds. The apparent mission of this trip was to locate and eliminate the entity. They returned to Blackwater the next day with the cadaver of this goat, and over the following days, Foundation web crawlers identified a spike in activity centered around possible anomalous events in Blackwater. Epsilon 6 Village Idiots was dispatched to the town, and after confiscating the goat carcass, they amnestized the Alger family and other related individuals. So we're setting up our backstory here for, I guess this was our first usage of it, and this was, when was this? 1998. There it is. So we're giving some context for why we're reading about this now, which would make this more or less a current event, which I like about this piece as well. We have our second addendum here, a recovery log. Following the implementation of Protocol Influx, personnel were sent to re-amnestize the residents of Blackwater. Upon entering the Alger family home, only Larry Jr. was discovered. The house was searched, and a notebook which belonged to him was recovered, and the transcript is shown below. And this is mostly the remainder of the piece is this sort of journal entry. And this looks like this goes between the old times, like up to hunting down this goat, and after the fact, which was pretty cool. So previously wrote, helped Miss Helga organize some library books today. Found this old one about fables, cyclops, mummies, demons, that sort of thing. I asked her if we had any legendary creatures here. She said that we had the usual small town legends, but she remembered her father telling her this fairy tale about a demon goat. Apparently the story goes the farmer bought the goat from a shady dealer who was actually the devil, and the goat kills all of his farm animals and eventually eats his children. The farmer eventually kills it by shooting it in the back of the head while it was grazing. Dark stuff. And the next passage in here says, "Holy shit, the goat's real. Tyson and I were hunting quail. We saw it in a field, big and scary as hell. Looked right at our hiding spot. I don't think it saw us. Tyson was being a dumbass and tried to shoot at it. He missed and it ran away." And asked my dad later about the goat. He got pissed and said it brought bad energy to the house. Asked him if he saw it before. He said he saw it once. He was driving in the middle of the night back in 1957. It's 1998 now, so that would make the goat 51. That struck through 41 years old. Fuck, I can't do math. Do goats live that long? And then it says, I chained Rover up. She was yapping really loud. I fed her some treats and she quieted down. Next passage says, Dad and I found Rover's body in the backyard. We're going to kill that fucking goat. And then it says, for a demon goat that eats children, that was surprisingly easy. Dad, Tyson, and I basically walked around for 3 hours until we saw it. Tyson wanted to shoot it, but he was probably going to miss like last time. I managed to get really close to it and put down 2 shots. It fell. Dad put a shotgun in its mouth and killed it. Tyson got mad, but he didn't do jack shit. We took it back to town. Dad showed it around saying that we killed the devil. People got mad and called the police, but nothing really happened. Jesus, I never knew how important fables were to this town. Then it says, local family kills infamous demon goat terrorizing small town, in quotes. Hell yeah, now that's a headline. And the next entry in this is dated May 13th, 2019, 21 years after the previous entry. And so we can assume, given the Foundation's, sort of recounting of this, that they amnestized this group after this all happened. And so 21 years later, he writes, "Wow, I didn't know I still had this. How old was I when I wrote this? I had some kind of flashback while I was on the road the other day. Remembered this was in my closet. I started reading through some of it, and did all this happen? This might be that creative writing assignment I had to do for Mrs. Schwartz's class. I loved that." And then it says, "Well, I already wrote in it, so I might as well give an update. My father died a few years ago, heart attack in his sleep. I read some of the love poems I wrote for Haley. We got together for a bit, but it didn't work out. We still keep in touch. Tyson's off in the big city, co-owning an upstart fertilizer company, so he's doing well. As for me, I've just been here surviving." Interesting little fleshing it out. This is probably not super relevant if you're the Foundation, and you would probably redact this whole piece, as it's, you're trying to keep your researchers focused on the prize here. And then it says, "I looked up that article from the newspapers about us killing the goat. I couldn't find it online, but I looked in the library records. Mrs. Helga's still around somehow, and I saw a copy. Apparently the newspaper got retracted because of a grammatical error on the front page. I couldn't see one, but I've never been good at writing. It called us heroes in the first sentence. Heroes. Damn, that must have been a real ego boost. Can't focus on the past too much, though. People have told me it's unhealthy." So we're seeing, like, the Foundation made this newspaper recounting go away as well. It's all really nice touches throughout this for what a disinformation campaign from the Foundation might look like. And it says, "No, the paper wasn't retracted. I showed the paper to Mrs. Helga and Haley, and they remember too. Someone took it down. Someone from the government. They came here and did something. They did something, and then they took it down. A disease. Yeah, they said there was some newly discovered disease related to sheep from the southwest. They inoculated us, but I don't," and then it breaks off. It says, "No, that's not what happened. There wasn't any disease. That doesn't make sense. There was some reason, but I don't know what. One of them had a symbol on their uniform. Let me..." And then you see a drawing below this of sort of the basic inner circle of the Foundation logo. And said, "I showed that drawing to them. They remembered it. I don't know what it means, but I remember so it has to be important." So I like this little addition to this little sketch. It's cheap to do and scan in, or even just, this looks like this was just a picture taken from a phone, and it adds a lot of personality to the piece doing something like this. So this continues. "I think I'm getting too deep into this. I started to imagine reporters that would crowd around me, asking me question after question. I'd talk to myself, answering the questions. I don't think I'm crazy, I want to go back to when Dad and I brought the goat back to the town, and everyone started celebrating. They called me a hero. Me, a little old mechanic in a little old town with no chance for success, was the hero. It's a dream. A pathetic, youthful dream that I'm still hoping will happen. I need to stop chasing it." Then it said, "I talked to Haley and Mrs. Helga today. Told them to stop worrying about the newspaper. It was a mistake anyway. Some newspaper cataloger made an error. Haley got mad and said I was giving up and letting the government win. She said she was going to find out what happened with or without me. She's probably sitting in her house waiting for her buddies on her conspiracy forums to reply. Mrs. Helga went back to the library. She said she might retire soon." And note, the next entry is dated June 27, 2019, 25 days after the previous entry. It says, and it's just talking about like just a movie that he saw. And then 2 months later, "Sick today. I have a cold." And then another one like 3 weeks after that, some Bible quotes. "Since you are precious and honored in my sight, and because I love you, I will give people in exchange for you, nations in exchange for your life. He who testifies to these things says, yes, I am coming soon. Amen. Come, Lord Jesus. The father of a righteous child has great joy. A man who fathers a wise son rejoices in him. Amen." And no date is visible on the next entry, and it reads simply, "I never killed the devil, did I?" Following recovery of the notebook, Larry Alger Jr., Allison Helga, and Haley Woodcock were re-amnestized. Efforts into locating and re-amnestizing Tyson Alger are ongoing. End article. This is a really ambitious piece. This took on a very likely logistical error, which is the amnestics fucking wore off, and personalized it in a really interesting way, where we're seeing this little hunting party that went and killed an anomalous animal, and just this whole story of like, I love how it was presented in real time, and then go finding it later, and because of the amnestics, like, this must have been a creative writing project I did. I dig it a lot. This piece I find to be fairly underrated at plus 32 right now, and it is mostly due to a lack of eyes. It looks like the current ratings are 33 up and 1 down. Those are pretty good numbers. That's hard to argue with, man. So I'm going to throw mine on the pile. This was a great piece. It has just a couple of little things that, I think you get better with time in dealing with figuring out what can be omitted, because it's, you have to pose this as this is something a researcher's trying to read, and I know that we're trying to sort of intentionally insert these less relevant things, but I think you could even do that by saying, no further details about the anomaly were recorded until this time, despite X number of records or whatever. Leave it a little more subtle, something where you can reward the reader a little bit for their cleverness. In any event, really liked this piece, and this was a +1 from me. Now, last but not least, SCP-4715, titled A Demon Born of War by Dr. Balthazar. This is a rewrite of SCP-517-ARC, which has since been deleted. The top comment in this skip has a link to it as it exists on the Internet Archive. Now, this one is quite lengthy. We're going to be trying to hit the high points here. We have an object class of Keter. We have an image of what looks to be a fossilized skull. It is not in the story fossilized skull, but it looks that way. You can see this is, in particular, the center of the shot is focused on the mouth, and in particular some very large teeth. And it says this is the facial region of 4715's skull after an encounter with SCP Black Box. So the procedures are super long. They are, let's see, 2 paragraphs, a procedure in a box. That's another long paragraph. So 4 paragraphs all total just for the containment procedures. So the procedures begin by noting that the skip has been contained in the containment complex within Area 4715-23, an underground compound 315 meters below sea level at an undisclosed location within Canada's Stikine region. That's up in northwestern British Columbia, out in western Canada, chosen for both its distance from the nearest city and proximity to LOI 517 Sigma, location of interest in the footnote, and stocks of materials required for the procedure 4715 Waning Moon are to be maintained on site. So I'm not a big fan of saying that this is an undisclosed location in the containment procedures. That is dangerously close to redacting containment procedures, and doing that is not necessary for containment of this entity, as the work bears it out. So we have the complex that handles the containment is 2 cells, each 20 by 30 by 20 meters, so quite large, seasonally simulating the mid-Pleistocene era between -10 and 5 degrees centigrade, so fairly chilly as well. Underground, that shouldn't be too terribly difficult to manage. Central Observation and Security Lab oversees both chambers, observation panels, constructed from laminated ballistics glass 25 centimeters thick. That's thick glass. That's so thick I feel like you can't actually see out of it. It would be too distorted. And plate steel shutters behind that. Heavy stuff. So in addition, we have video, motion sensing, thermal security, an automated chemical deterrent systems. They spray concentrated capsaicin-based agents as an aerosol should the skip breach containment. It will continue to be sprayed until the skip has been neutralized, and should the personnel prove incapable of preventing the skip from exiting this area, detonation of the on-site thermobaric weapon is authorized. Following this, recontainment must be carried out before it is able to fully recover. So we're setting off a weapon here. Thermobaric, by the way, it's a type of explosion that uses it feeds off of creating additional oxygen. So what happens is you have an extremely high temperatures in this explosion, and because of the increased burn, the shock wave is also a lot more powerful than your conventional explosives. So that's apparently still not enough to actually kill this thing. So that's concerning. So we have a collapsible for procedure 4715, Waning Moon. It's a ritual that has to be performed on the full moon of each month. It involves 1 D-class, 60 kilograms of red meat, a hand-woven wicker basket. I hope that's a big-ass basket for 60 kilograms of red meat, and human blood. So the shaman must be anointed with the human blood. There's a footnote that says, applied in the designs depicted in document 4. We don't actually have that document. That'd be cool, though. And will then place the meat within the wicker basket. 60 kilograms, that's what, like 130 pounds, thereabout? That's some strong wicker, man. No other personnel may carry out this task. They will then enter the chamber and place the meat on the ground before it, before the skip, arranging it to match the design depicted on their anointed blood. Prostrate themselves before the basket and recite the phrase, "This we offer for your continued torpor, flesh of your time, blood of my blood." And the D-class remains prostrate and continues reciting the phrase until the skip has consumed all of the meat. And after consuming the meat, they may or may not kill and eat this D-class as well, but doing so does not indicate a failure of the procedure. That sucks for the D-class. Should the D-class survive, they are to retrieve the basket and exit the containment chamber. Failure to perform this procedure results in an exponential increase in aggression from the skip, characterized by a marked increase in attempts to breach containment. To date, double-digit black box % of these attempts have been successful. That's also not great. So our chambers have to be cleaned following that procedure each month, so then they're sent to the adjacent chamber. That's why we have 2 of them. And unless actively attempting to breach, no physical harm or actions insinuating aggressive intent may be inflicted upon the skip. In the event of a containment breach, aim at the head with as much force as possible in order to render it unconscious or comatose before it grows too large to recontain. We threw in a very interesting word right at the end of the procedures. So it is described as a large hexapodal mammalian carnivore with chimeric morphology, standing at a minimum height of 5.2 meters and weighing roughly 2,300 kilograms. Huge thing. Genetic analysis has been inconsistent. It has some modern wildlife in it, including humans, gorillas, alpine ibex, and binturong, which we have at the local zoo, as well as Miocene and Pleistocene era stuff, the giant ground sloth, the marsupial lion, etc., and anomalous animals such as SCP Black Box, and further data has been redacted on this, as it encompasses multiple anomalous and otherwise contained species. It has a robust muzzle, a vaguely feline skull with a carnivorous dental structure, forward set eyes, and a stout muzzle. So vaguely feline, about 17 feet tall and weighing about 4,700 pounds. It's a big thing. Oh, and 6 legs. don't forget about that. It also has a pair of backward swept horns, quite large, which are not present in any member of Carnivora. Its primary forelimbs are long, with proportionately large hands, with 7 digits each extending in a large semi-retractable claw. The secondary forelimbs are multi-jointed and significantly longer. These each end in 3 heavily clawed digits, and the hind legs appear ursine, with a long muscular tail that can act like a tripod for balance when standing on its hind legs. We're spending a lot of time describing this thing, and it does sort of give you that Series 1 feel. We're talking about all of this monstrosity in great detail, even if it's not necessarily directly related to containment, but it is related to the description, and given how monstrous this creation is, I think it is worth spending the time to try and paint the picture for the reader. We continue and note the skip is highly aggressive and has been observed attempting to attack most sapient life it has encountered. That's important. However, when observed in situ, it appears disinterested in most other fauna. It's never been observed hunting or pursuing other organisms, and larger fauna avoids it, instinctively fleeing from its scent. It displays a level of intelligence roughly on par with that of a chimpanzee, and displays particular aptitude for the fashioning and usage of tools as weapons, apparently able to even manage quite complex tools. It's also highly intuitive, able to accurately read the emotional and mental state of sapient entities around it. And in the event that it perceives an entity attempting to harm another, including itself, it will rapidly gain mass proportional to the number of such entities. The source of new mass gained during these episodes is unknown. The most egregious breach saw 4715 reach a height of approximately 24 meters and a weight approaching an estimated 56,000 kilograms. But depictions in historic artifacts suggest the potential to grow larger given sufficient exposure to situations of conflict. The effect reverses quickly as soon as the skip no longer senses harmful intentions, and it radiates intense heat as its mass decreases. I like that. That doesn't really add anything outside of trying to explain a mass to energy conversion here. The skip has been observed attempting to draw uninvolved individuals into states of conflict in order to increase its biomass, and often displays fascination and attraction towards states of conflict between sapient beings. Very interesting way to end this particular paragraph. We spend the next 2 paragraphs talking about what a tough bastard this thing is. It's resistant to all sorts of stuff. Basically, we found this capsaicin-based stuff is the only thing it doesn't have a particular resistance to right off the bat, and it is incredibly regenerative. It can regrow a lost limb within a week. We go to an addendum, the existence of the skip being confirmed by the Foundation in October of 1916, following event 4715-WWI-1916. I would assume this is in reference to World War I. But there's evidence suggesting the origin dates back significantly further in history. We definitely get there by the end of this thing. We go into a list of some historic documentation that backs up our understanding of the skip so far. We found frescoes in a subterranean Roman structure in 1980 that show a sequence of events involving Roman soldiers in battle against Sasanian forces, the late Persian Empire. And the fresco shows the skip engaging both forces, and the final fresco shows the Romans appeasing the skip with large stocks of meat. There's one of a proto-human cave painting discovered in 2005 in France, showing 4715 engaging in attacks on humans, with many examples being surrounded by skulls and other symbolic imagery. Carbon dating places this at 32 to 30,000 years before present. And this example we have relevant details below each of these, which is I can take or leave. It says the example pictured is believed to depict 4715 engaging in an intimidation display. It's not known what the display was directed towards, as the cave wall beside this painting had been destroyed. We had a wood carving from mid-14th century Prussia with mounted Teutonic knights engaging in a cavalry charge against the skip, in one of the earliest known depictions of its size-altering effect being made aware. We have a journal from a Chinese farmer between 1850 and 1864 who observed and sketched what he described as a monster emerging from a large pile of battlefield casualties and moving at speed in the direction of Nanjing. And we have a small translation in here. After the village was massacred and the soldiers moved on, there were many bodies still clinging to earthly possessions that could be of great aid to my family. Waiting for the cover of nightfall, the smell was even worse than usual for a massacred town, and it seemed, in the light of the setting sun, that the sea of corpses stretched as far as the eye could see. Then from the tallest of the piles of the dead came a monster. It burst forth from the dead like a great fish from the sea, and its bellow was so evil it could not possibly come from a godly creature. It shook the blood from its midnight hair and fled with haste to Nanjing. And we go to a second addendum, saying that this is a level 4 classified addendum from the area director, noting in a preface that we're explaining LOI 517 Sigma and how valuable it has been to our understanding of the skip. This location was found by civilian outdoor enthusiast cavers in 2009. They informed the University of British Columbia, describing some kind of shiny bunker or Egyptian Colosseum in some caves lit up by shiny plants. The university basically told them to pound sand, but the Foundation was interested and checked it out and started exploring it, found a huge structure inside, and within the structure was a long abandoned and dormant entrance to an organic complex of similar construction to, and we have a link to SCP-2932, located about 900 meters below sea level. And this complex looked like it had a similar function as our location, focused on the containment of 4715. Minimal signs of damage to any of the structures, and the organic devices within are alive and powered, but inactive. And a substructure at the bottom of this complex was confirmed to once house 4715 and is constructed from indestructible plant material inscribed with various designs bearing similarity to those found in various occult manuscripts and cave paintings. So we continue digging. We find through this complex multiple images of 4715 depicting it engaging numerous instances of the original owners of the cave. Here's a link, see document alpha 1596-1000 for more information. This is a link to SCP-1000, and I think this was the biggest misstep in the work. I think we cut to the punchline too soon with this link. I think we could have added this at the very end, but we did not. So we show in here 4715 is significantly larger than any recorded size we've ever had of it. And beyond those pertaining to containment, there were two notable sources of documentation located within this cave that shed some light on the origin of the subject. There have been, these were translated from images provided to 2932A, who told Foundation personnel it was unaware of this location, citing its lack of omniscience. So two documents, both transcribed. One was a carved thing above the access ports on the structure comprising the containment chamber. And it's largely illegible, but what is legible: lingering price of overthrowing those that came before, a demon born of blood and war, the bloodiest night where children and Fae is a link to SCP-00105, alike discriminately, wept and watched as loved ones turned to light, and from atrocity was born abomination, our fault, their fault, slaughterer of thousands but was thrown down, remain incarcerated for endless rotation. So our belief is that this was information about it as a failsafe. And our final document in here, this was painted on a wall, and this was next to a large organic mechanism with various interfaces, and it's presumed this device controlled the security or power of the complex, and it reads, "The day the flowers bloomed was long ago now. Our shining cities are gone. Their surviving children turned to beasts of the earth. We are gone now. The children of the sun have turned our weapons upon themselves, and they sleep in the night. They know not of the demon born from war, and cast aside any tool that could turn aside its fury. Endless rotation ends now. May the hairless usurpers suffer at its hands and pay for their transgression. To any child of the night who finds my message, know that I have committed this crime to avenge our demise. You will not forgive me. And we note at the end, along with this message, the skeleton of an SCP-1000 instance was discovered resting on the floor of the room with a hole in its skull. Analysis and carbon dating of the skull suggests the individual killed itself 34 to 33,000 years before present. End article. So there's a lot of good in this piece. There are some things that feel Series 1 in a great way and things that I'm less enamored with in this piece. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot more good than bad going on here, but a couple of things that struck me as we continued through this. And actually, before I do that, so 517, thinking about old school 517, pre-archiving, was basically like a big mammalian 682. So it was understandably removed, and once it was arced, it, sort of had a better life after that. It was, sort of upvoted. It was at plus 52 on deletion, but it was deleted through our rewrite policy. So it is true to the roots of this piece, and what we've done here is given it a reason for being. We talk about the demon born from war and how that makes a lot of sense given everything that we hinted at through the description of this and how it behaves and how it can grow in size so rapidly. Really interesting stuff in that regard. I think we probably went a little too long on the historic documentation, or perhaps this could have been better done as a table or something, but it started to drag a little bit through this description. And yes, we have that S1 feel of we're talking a lot about all the things it can do and how it behaves, but we should probably make a little time to throw the reader a bone, throw them a hook to keep their attention, because it reads a little more like an and then it can do this and it can do this and it can do this and it can do this, and we have to kind of mix that up. We have to throw in things to make the reader want to keep want to keep going, want to keep understanding what all this thing can do, and little things as to why, or throwing in some conflict, we got to break this up with something, because as you look at it, it's just, as far as I can see, are just blocks of paragraphs, and we have to keep that mixed up just to keep the reader engaged. Even if it's good writing, you still have to do that. You've got to go get their attention, because we have short attention spans, and even at SCP length, we have short attention spans. We're very spoiled in that regard. I think the links to 1000 were very smart, but I take some issue with the exact execution. I feel like it is such a good way to connect things that we should have left it out for the very end. Like, the longer you can hold off on that, your build up to payoff, it's a great payoff, and you could have had, more build up to get there. Even and you can, what I mean by that is you can move that punchline, even if you don't change the length of the thing, move that hook, that 1000, that first mention of it, toward the very end, because as it is, we had 4 more paragraphs to get through, and it's like, I think it lost some of its potential impact in going about it that way. It's a really sensible way to go about it. We have a couple of crosslinks here. One of the things that, given this is technically a Series 1 rewrite, it doesn't feel like it as much as some of the other ones that I've read lately. That's not necessarily a knock against it, but you think about the little trappings of Series 1 rewrites, making those little callbacks to things that you can't really do anymore in a work. We don't do a lot of that. We don't we have a couple of links to other pieces, but not in a way that, okay, so 517 ARC has bits about the Foundation holding betting, like holding pools, office pools, on who would win between 517 and 682 to give you some perspective of what you're coming from here. And I'm not saying do that, don't misunderstand, but you have a rare chance to throw in some goofy stuff like that and root it in those Series 1 origins. And, so I would have liked to have seen a little bit more done in that regard. But even without it, the links that we do have are sensible. And in the case of 1000, I think really, really smart and impactful. Overall, really did enjoy this piece, and this was a +1 from me. Now I have 2 mailbag questions here. JChem asks, which GOI formats do you generally tend to enjoy the most and why, and which do you tend to dislike? I like quite a lot of them. Going off the top of my head, Chicago Spirit, I really enjoy. The Shark Punching Center is always fun. I think that we've sort of generally agreed that the Pepper's Ghost imagining of the SPC is going to be the canonical one, and I think that's a lot of fun to work with. Anderson, Marshall Carter, and Dark. The only one I would say I'm really not a fan of as a GOI format is Oneroy. I don't like the whole dreamy Twitter thing. I find it to be a little too out there and dada for my tastes. But I think you can tell interesting stories with it, but it's a little too difficult for me to honestly follow most of the time. I'm not, and maybe it's like I'm personally not willing to invest that much into trying to sort it out because it all looks so effortless, like so little, here's a little piece, and perhaps there is a story to put together, but it's not presented to me in a way that I feel generally inclined to try to actually go figure out what they're talking about. So that's me and Oneroy. I always want to see more SPC stuff. Always. You write SPC stuff, let me know. I want to know about it. So we're about at the end of the line. The only thing I have after here is some nerd stuff. If you like nerd stuff, great. Stick around. I think it's going to be really interesting and exciting for people. If you don't want to hear about a bunch of nerd stuff, that's totally fair. I don't blame you. And I will see you next week. AIS Mallard asks, what is SCUTTLE and what's been happening with it? Something about backups. So, I've been working for about the last 3 weeks now on doing a full overhaul of SCUTTLE, which is the servers. So I have a database that is made to be a backup of the Wiki, and I had originally done this through the API. Wikidot has an API, but it's not great. You can do very little with it. You can get you can do a select on a particular page, right? And it'll give you a little bit of info, but say you want to go get a particular revision of a page, you can't do it. There is no way to do it in the Wikidot API. So the first version of SCUTTLE made use of page scraping. I was using Selenium WebDriver and going page by page, clicking the source button, getting the resulting shit, and sending it to SCUTTLE via API. So those tools, the little scripts running Selenium, I've called them 2 stacks, and I'll explain that at some point down the road once this thing's closer to done. But SCUTTLE never worked 100% the way I wanted it to. It does work really, you can see the old version of SCUTTLE, and this will probably not age well, what I'm about to say, but it is currently at scpfoundation.wiki/whatever page you want to go to. If a document is, if multiple articles existed in the same slot, you can go back in time to previous iterations of it. So if some of these articles have had, some of these pages have had 5-6 revisions, entirely different articles in the same slot, and all of them have been captured by SCUTTLE just through regular scraping of the site. So the new version makes use of there's an Ajax connector that you can make post requests on at Wikidot. And what this connector does, it has a ton of modules you can call, and each module, none of this is documented, by the way. Like, I had to go find the source code on GitHub and sort of work my way backwards. Like, okay, it's expecting these parameters, so I can send a post with this and this and this, and oh shit, there's how I get a revision. Like, here's something stupid. If you want to get a page ID, just an identifier for the page, you can't do it from the API. You have to go to a wiki site, scrape the first, I think, 2,800 bytes of the page, and in there will be the page ID. Then you can go, you've kind of got something to work from. So the new version of SCUTTLE, this is basically a total rewrite. I'm using Amazon Web Services to drive everything. The new SCUTTLE database is Aurora MySQL, and the tasks are now, rather than using Selenium WebDriver and scraping, we're using AWS Lambda, and that is their serverless code execution platform. So I can say on a schedule, run my big job every 5 minutes, go get me the list of all the pages on the site. And it says, okay, I get that. I send that list to SCUTTLE. SCUTTLE looks at it, says, okay, I've got all these. Oh, I don't have this one. So it sends a note via Amazon SQS Simple Queue service and says, okay, go get me, I know the very basics about this page. I know it exists. Go get me metadata for it. So a Lambda is then run. It goes and gets the metadata. It sends that back to SCUTTLE. SCUTTLE analyzes it all and says, fantastic. Now we need all the voting history for the page. We need all the revisions for the page. We need all of the votes on the page. And we need any files attached to the page. And fires off 4 Lambdas, 1 for each of those things that it needs. Those all execute and go back to SCUTTLE, and it will capture an entire page, its revision history, all files, and a list of everybody that voted and how in 6 seconds. I'm super excited about this. So SCUTTLE right now has every revision every revision currently available on the SCP Wiki. I can't include pages that have been hard deleted, but if the page is on the wiki right now, I have every revision that page has ever had, every one of them. The forum, this was the one thing when Ailana and I were talking about this like in 2012, what a pain in the ass it was going to be to capture the forums. I figured out how to do that. I have every forum post, for now in the per page discussions forum, but I just need to basically flip a little switch and turn that on for all of the forums. And it's, there's a lot of those, by the way. There's over 1 million posts. There's something like, let me see, I got it pulled up here actually right now. So the current revision count, 235,512 revisions. So if, that's saying we've got like 11,000, how many pages? Let's see, pages, select count, execute that, 11,209 pages on the wiki. We were just over 9,000 when the first iteration of SCUTTLE began. And so now we're at 11,209 for votes, which I need to sort of sanity check. That's my next thing to do. The count of votes, 2,202,619. And this will work much like Skipper does, which I am a patron of, that will keep track of voting history. Say, oh, well, yesterday this was an upvote and today it's gone. So this, we're now going to count as a no vote from this user, or, they flip-flopped and went from a plus to a minus, blah, blah, blah. I'll be able to keep track of all that now. The SCUTTLE database altogether right now is about 7 gigs. Oh, I also have a copy of every file that is currently posted to the wiki, and that's stored in Amazon S3, and I've got connectors, like I've got little rows in the database saying, okay, this is the file size, this is the type, and this is a link to go get it from S3. So this has been partly a learning project for me because I want to do more AWS stuff. So this is how, basically, I'm doing this partly as a learning project, partly because I'm really passionate about archiving and backing up stuff, but also to sort of lay out a foundation of what a self-hosted SCP wiki might look like. So when I was building the database for this, I started with the smallest one I could provision on Aurora, and that's like a single core. I think it's either 1 or 2 cores and 2 gigs of RAM. And so we start adding stuff to the database with these lambdas. They're firing, and I'm watching the CPU rise. It's going up. I don't make the connection Y immediately. I go and I'm like, all right, well, it's going to be really busy right now. This is the busiest this database will ever be. So I'm going to provision a monster server right now. So the base Aurora server costs you about 4 cents an hour. The one I put in its place costs you $1.16, about $800 a month if you want to run this thing full time. So that worked for a while. It really helped. And then that CPU started climbing. It wasn't until the next day I realized, oh, I haven't put a single index on this database beyond primary keys. So I have to go back. I add some indexes in some logical places on wiki.identifiers, and all of a sudden, CPU drops like a frickin' rock. So now I've gone back to it's not the tiniest of the available servers. It's the second smallest because it has enough RAM to actually load the index tables, which are a little large for a couple of those. And it is running very, very smoothly. Even running, I was hitting that database yesterday with 25 requests a second for storing revision data, and the CPU was not going above 4%. So I think I've got it figured out. So this is potentially what the future of the wiki might be. This is the one thing we really wanted to be buttoned up before we made any decisions. We need to get wiki data in a way that we can reliably get it and export it and move it around and transform it and put it somewhere where, even if we just use this, it's somewhere where we can we don't have to rely on Wikidot to give us a goddamn thing because we've already got it. And so this is a huge deal. My next steps for Scuttle, basically right now, I've got sort of a point in time thing. I need to start adding the schedule tasks, getting the voting history, going and checking the forums periodically and getting all the new posts. But that's pretty much it. And the logic's already there on the Lambda side. I just have to go add some new stuff on the Scuttle side to say, okay, well, this is one of the scheduled jobs, so I have to treat this a little differently than the initial job where I'm just sort of blindly populating stuff because I know it's empty. I know I don't have to really sanity check that. But this has been a great project for me, just in seeing all the infrastructure, all the operations side come together and really settle down once you remember to do things like putting indexes on your data tables. Makes a big difference, turns out. So that is Scuttle. It is, and it's not cheap. I'll admit the Aurora server, if I were to keep it running, even the second smallest one is about $60 a month. I've been doing this part out of my pocket just as because it's like a learning process. I don't yet know how I'm going to finance this long term. I probably will just stick this on a server that I already own once it's stabilized and I get the last few things worked out on a nice high performance server. I can move it to something a little bit slower for the time being and significantly cheaper, or even roll it into a server that I already own and just install MySQL and load that data set, because 7 gigs and I think it's 500 megs of RAM in this index table, that's totally manageable. You can do that on not a lot of server. So that's Scuttle. That's my my nerd talk for the day. And with that, I'm going to say see you later because I have some more nerd stuff to do. I have a new computer to put together. I've got an all Xeon, all Optane setup. I'm going to be taking the computer I'm recording this on right now apart, repurposing its case, and trying to make this work. I'm really hoping I have something together by next Friday, and if not, I'm going to be recording it from my laptop, which I suppose that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but I really want to get this done today. So I'm going to get going on that, and I'll see you guys next week. If you thought this show was worth $1, patreon.com/scpcafe is the best way to do exactly that. So for the week 42 show, keep reading, keep writing, and I'll see you on the other side.